There's a man standing in his living room right now, surrounded by boxes he ordered last month and never opened. He's not lazy. He's not bad with money. His brain simply ran out of decisions before it got to the one that mattered, whether to buy that thing at all. If nothing changes, this is the same man who, 5 years from now, still has no real savings, just a bigger version of the same pile and a slightly higher credit card balance every year. And if you're watching this right now, there's a good chance some part of that felt familiar. So here's the real question. 5 years from today, are you the version of you that finally broke that pattern? Or the same one, just a little deeper in it? That's not a willpower problem. That's a decision problem. And there are 9 minimalist money rules the financially stable follow that have nothing to do with discipline. They have to do with deciding less, not spending less. Everything you're about to see comes from dozens of hours spent going through behavioral research on financial minimalism, peer-reviewed studies, not opinions. And by the end of this list, there's one specific number waiting for you. The actual dollar amount one man's decisions were quietly costing him. It's smaller than you'd expect it to take to change everything. Keep that in the back of your mind. By the end of this, you won't just understand why some people always seem to have money left over. You'll have a clear, simple filter you can use on your very next purchase, one that quietly protects your bank account without you having to think twice about it. Rule 1. Own less, not nothing. A guy named Marcus spent a Sunday afternoon doing something most people never bother to do. He actually added up what his stuff was costing him, not the price tags from when he bought everything. The ongoing cost, the part nobody puts on a receipt. There was the storage unit, $140 a month, holding furniture from an apartment he hadn't lived in for 2 years. There was the slightly bigger place he'd rented specifically because his last one didn't have enough room, even though most of what filled that extra room hadn't been touched since he moved in. There was the insurance rider on camera gear he used maybe 4 times a year. None of it ever showed up as one big alarming number. It just quietly took a bite out of his income every single month, forever, for things he'd genuinely forgotten he owned. When he finally sat down and added the whole thing up, storage, extra square footage, insurance, the slow subscription creep of maintaining a life full of stuff, the number stopped him. We'll come back to exactly what it was, because it's the same number this entire video eventually leads to. This is the part minimalism actually targets first. Not spending less in the moment, but owning less over time. Every possession has a second price tag nobody mentions. The space it takes, the upkeep it needs, the decision of what to do with it later. The financially stable aren't the people who never buy anything. They're the people who understand that every object they keep is quietly renting space in their life and their budget. Rule 2. Decide less, win more. You've probably noticed it in a few successful people without knowing why. The same handful of outfits on rotation, the same breakfast most mornings, the same coffee order, no debate. It looks like a lack of imagination. It's actually the opposite. It's protection. In one well-known study, judges reviewing parole cases granted parole far more often early in the morning, and far less often right before a break. Same cases, same laws, just a mind running low on fuel. By the end of the day, the odds of a favorable ruling dropped close to 0, no matter how strong the case was. Money decisions work the same way. The fewer small, forgettable choices you burn through before noon. What to wear, what to order, which app to check, the sharper you are when a real financial decision finally shows up later that day. Marcus, it turns out, used to spend almost 10 minutes every morning just deciding what to wear to a job where nobody cared. That's 10 minutes and a small slice of mental fuel, gone before his day even started. Rule 3, 1 in, 1 out. This is the 1 in, 1 out rule, and it sounds almost too simple to matter until you watch what it prevents. A new jacket means an old one goes. A new gadget means the one it replaced actually leaves the house, not the drawer. Without this rule, life doesn't stay the same size. It just grows quietly, purchase by purchase, until one day you're standing in a living room full of things you can't even remember buying, exactly like the man from the beginning of this video. The rule isn't a about deprivation, it's a hard ceiling. A line that says, whatever I already have is enough to maintain, and anything new has to earn its place by replacing something, not just adding to the pile. Marcus started applying this rule right after his Sunday math session. It felt almost too small to matter at first. Keep that in mind, because this exact rule is about to save him from making the same mistake all over again, just a few minutes from now in this video. Rule 4. The subscription trap streaming services. Apps, memberships. None of them feel like spending in the moment. They feel like nothing. $9 here, $14 there. Invisible because no single one is ever the problem on its own. Research from C+R Research and West Monroe found the average person estimates they spend around $86 a month on subscriptions. The actual itemized total is closer to $219, a gap of over $1,500 a year, sitting in a category most people would swear was basically nothing. When Marcus pulled up his bank statement and actually circled every recurring charge, he found 11 of them. He'd been using 4. The financially stable treat recurring commitments the same way they treat physical possessions. There's a hard limit on how many they'll carry at once, and something has to be canceled before something new gets added. Here's something worth holding on to. Rule 9 on this list isn't really a new rule. It's going to explain why every single rule before it actually works. And it's also where we finally come back to Marcus's number and what he did with it. Rule 5. The couch that multiplied. A few months into all of this, Marcus finally bought the one thing he'd been saving for. A couch. Nice fabric, real wood legs, the kind of thing he'd wanted for years. Within a week, he caught himself looking at the coffee table next to it differently. It suddenly looked cheap. So did the old rug. So did the lamp that had been perfectly fine the day before. This has an actual name, the Diderot effect, first described by anthropologist Grant McCracken after studying the philosopher Denis Diderot, who replaced his old robe with an elegant new one, and then slowly replaced everything else in his study just to keep it company. One nice new object doesn't just sit there. It quietly recruits company. Here's where Rule 3 paid off. Marcus caught himself mid-thought, remembered the couch was already his one in, and put the coffee table plan away. 3 purchases he almost made, gone, because he'd already built the rule that stopped them before they started. Rule 6. Stop upgrading yourself. Same brand of shoes for a decade. Same model of car until the wheels fall off. Same phone until it physically stops working. From the outside, it can look like someone who isn't doing well. In reality, they've simply opted out of a game most people don't even realize they're playing. The same game Rule 5 just warned about, except aimed at themselves instead of their living room. Every upgrade is a tiny vote for a slightly different identity, and identities are expensive to keep updating. It's the same recruiting effect from the couch, just pointed at your own reflection instead of your coffee table. Rule 7. One number once a month. Somewhere out there is someone logging every $4 coffee into an app, feeling a small hit of guilt each time, and still not saving any more than they were before. That's not discipline. That's decision fatigue wearing a budgeting costume. Asking, was that purchase okay? Dozens of times a day is still a decision, every time. And it's exactly the kind of decision Rule 2 already warned you drains the tank you'll need later. The financially stable check one number on a set schedule, usually once a month, not because the small stuff doesn't add up, but because one meaningful checkpoint protects the same limited resource that all those tiny check-ins would otherwise quietly drain. Marcus picked the first of every month, nothing else. No daily app notifications, no guilt spirals over coffee. Rule 8. Want versus need fast. Can I afford it? Sounds responsible, but it's actually a complicated question hiding a dozen smaller ones. Will this affect my savings goal? Is this worth it compared to what else I could do with the money? Will I still want this next month? Is this a want or a need? Is a 2-second filter that ends most purchases before that complicated question ever needs asking. Psychologist Tim Kasser of Knox College found that people who place higher value on acquiring possessions consistently report lower financial well-being, regardless of how much they actually earn. This filter isn't about guilt or morality. It's about stopping a low-value decision before it can quietly eat the same energy a real financial choice deserves. Rule 9. The real budget. Here's the part that reframes everything you just heard, and where we finally get back to that number. Every one of those 8 rules looked like it was about money. It wasn't. It was about a resource almost nobody thinks to budget: the number of good decisions your brain can make in a single day. Money is simply where that resource eventually shows up. Or doesn't. Remember Marcus's Sunday math session: storage, extra rent for extra space, insurance on things he barely used, subscriptions he'd forgotten existed. The final number was $3,180 a year. Not from a raise, not from cutting out coffee, just from decisions he was making, or not making, on autopilot, one small commitment at a time. The man from the beginning of this video isn't failing at money. He's spending his decision-making budget on 100 small, forgettable choices. What to order, what to click, what to compare, long before he ever gets to the one decision that actually determines his future. By the time that decision shows up, there's nothing left to make it well. The financially stable aren't smarter, and they don't have more willpower than anyone else. They just spend that budget on fewer things, on purpose, so there's still something left when it actually counts. 5 years from now, the real difference between the man in that living room and the version of you who changes course today won't be how much either of you earned. It'll be how many decisions you didn't have to make. And once that budget, money and decisions both, finally has some room to breathe, the next question usually isn't, how do I spend less? It's, where does this extra room actually go? That's the exact question I ranked 20 answers to, from the most boring to the most surprisingly profitable, in the video I'll leave right here.